Welcome to the Backpack Show.
Listen, this was the shirt on top of my pile of t-shirts. You just happen to have this on.
So these are very appropriate shirts to wear today because we both work for the same company. And these were given out when we reached 500 employees. Now we're like at 800.
Almost 800,
employees.
yeah.
When I was hired, it was 200 employees. So we have experienced a lot of change.
The week after we got these shirts, we added another 250 people to the organization.
Yeah, I probably should have just waited.
So we should probably find some change experts to talk about.
We've got some.
Oh. So we have Jenny Magic and Melissa Breker, who wrote the book
Change Fatigue.
Change Fatigue. I was going to call it Change Magic, which is so wrong, but also kind of cool.
They provide the change magic.
They do. So why don't we talk to them about change?
Hi, everyone. Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, welcoming you to The Backpack Show. Your hosts, Chris Brogan, Kerry Gorgone, Boom Shakalaka.
Backpack Show. Let's look at a V Castro.
We always look at different people when the intro plays. So this time for me was JB, the First Lady, the First Nation
rap
artist.
Yeah. I see my my biological father's wife, Diane Brogan, on the show.
Otherwise known as your mother.
Oh, my mother?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's Steve Brogan. That's my biological father.
They're always the first people in. It's really nice.
Makes me happy.
They're so supportive.
Well, let's bring on. Let's do ads. I almost
forget
ads.
Every time.
Just don't want to do. Hey,
I know.
You know what though? StreamYard is adding all kinds of new features. They have done so many new things. I just got another email a couple days ago.
You don't even use them though. You haven't. We haven't.
New features?
Yes, but there are a lot. cbrogan.net/StreamYard makes it stupid easy to run a video show like this one.
Watch this.
Get your own change management expert. Stop
there
it.
You go. That's a feature.
Nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that feature?
No.
Go ahead. Tell them like that. That's our sponsor. Okay. Hey, you want a .online domain? You can get one for 99 cents. You could have something really cool on blah, blah, blah .online. All you got to do is go to cbrogan.net/online and then just put in the code Chris however you like.
No. The code Chris has to be in all caps if you want the discount. I don't know why, but you have to do it in all caps.
They made their website in 1997.
Then you get your .online domain for 99 cents for a year.
All right, let's bring on Melissa and Jenny. Hey, welcome on board the show. We are so sick of change.
Everybody is.
Sucks. Change fatigue is so tough. Hi, Jane, by the way. Change fatigue, it's a perfect name for the book. Did you have a bunch of other bad names for the book before you got to there?
Oh, the titles were like extensively long. We were like word nerds who like we had to just keep chopping and chopping and chopping to get to something useful. But this felt, even though it's a negative thing, it just felt like so right on the moment.
Now we have like everybody's got this kind of base layer of stress that they didn't have before, because the pandemic and all the things that sprang from it. I feel like all of us kind of as a global society have really amped up the stress and it's kind of stayed there. Yeah. So now any change that happens in addition to that incredible life shift, I feel like is just people are just ready to be mad about it.
Yeah. The base temperature is a little high.
Yeah. So that's something that you've written a whole book about change fatigue. So I'm going to assume the baseline could change, right? It could change again. How like good is this advice? Will it hold through the next major crisis that gets everybody this close to freaking out?
Yeah, actually, if you dig in, it really is just a handbook on being a better manager, but it's about a certain kind of management, which is thinking ahead about where you're trying to take people and getting them to come along willingly instead of what I think a lot of organizations used in the past, bribery, manipulation, coercion. Those don't work as well anymore when your workforce is a little toast.
You say that like it's a bad thing. Melissa, what's the story? Is bribery bad? I feel like I'm going to be schooled.
I like a little bribery. We got Leslie to send us some maple syrup that she made herself, and we made her person of the day.
Well, I think it's a real balance between, where you're heading. Often, we have this vision of like, it comes down from top management, like this is happening. So really, when we think about bribery or coercion, actually involving people in the change early on has a much bigger effect than coming to them last minute and saying, psst, hey, by the way, this is happening. So be prepared on Monday. And really it's about being able to, again, bring people along for the journey. It's like to your show, what's in your backpack? How are you going to get there?
Well, and bribery works for a limited time. That's the real deal about bribery. Like it only works as long as I remember the cash in my pocket or while
You just have to keep bribing, Jenny.
Right. Yeah, it's a very
keep it coming.
expensive way of being.
So Kerry dragged you onto the show because she's reading the book, and you were at Content Marketing World and all that. It's a very interesting place to be giving that message, or did you bring that message there? Like, I'm wondering, like, what was the intersection between a bunch of marketing turd heads and change?
Yeah. So
You don't have to call them that.
Oh yeah, that's our term.
I will say that content marketers sit at a really unique intersections. For the last decade, they have been the innovators in the marketing team, trying to push all sorts of new ideas, new platforms, new technology, and it's not slowing down any. So change is sort of like part of the MO for a content marketer. But what we're noticing is that in a lot of cases, senior leaders and board of directors are really ready for business as usual. And so they're pushing our, middle managers, our leaders, to get back to normal and see those growth numbers and hit those targets at the same time that our workforce is sort of feels more confident saying no, is how I'll put that mildly. And so we were really noticing that the kind of folks who show up at a conference trying to figure out what's next for their organization are often in that tier of having the pressure from both sides. They've got a mandate from up top and a group of people they're intended to motivate who are right now, right this minute, resisting in ways I've never seen before. We helped a team with a tech rollout. They were trying to switch project management platforms. The new rollout was rejected. And it got to a conversation of like, what are you going to do? Fire me? Like that level of rejection. And the team responsible is like, we met the senior leadership's goals, have no clue how to go forward from this moment. So I think any team can be facing that kind of situation right now.
That's insane. That's insurrection.
Wait, what app didn't they like? Was it Asana?
They had actually built a custom
Makes
thing
sense.
on top of Microsoft. Surprisingly, that didn't go over very well.
So this is totally selfish on my part wanting you here, but we have a lot of teams that have joined from, like, say, startup size to mid-size organizations and now are part of a larger enterprise. And there's definitely some of that, this is our sandbox where we play with these tools. And now suddenly they're part of a team and we all need to figure out a way to work together. And we're experiencing some stress around that because some people want to trench and stay where they are. And other people are like, whatever, blow it all up. It's fine. So how do you bring a disparate team like that together when you've got multiple systems and multiple cultures and everything is sort of still operating like fiefdoms?
Right. I would say it's important to note that all change is loss. Even the most minor, teeny tiny change of the way I do something requires me to shift away from something that was comfortable or at least known to something that is less comfortable and less known. And that has a inherently negative connotation, regardless of how good the outcome is going to be on the other side of the shift. So it costs you something. And we like to refer to as change tokens. Costs you a change token when you ask someone to do something different. And you have a limited number of change tokens. And so I think managers forget that they need to really be thoughtful about prioritizing which things we're asking people to change. And some of the stuff that's not super relevant might make someone's job 2% easier. Like, leave that for later. Spend that when your change tokens refresh next month, right? And figure out how to focus on the ones that matter. If we've got two distinct collaboration tools going on over here blocking collaboration between silos, like that might be a priority to spend change tokens on. Whereas some other stuff that's just an inconvenience or an optimization, like maybe that can wait.
Melissa, anything to add to that one?
Yeah, I think the other thing is, building on Jenny's point, all change is personal, right? Because we all enter change at a different part of the journey. It's not like we're all starting at the beginning of the race. No. Some people are already ahead. Some people have already accepted change. And, they're further along in their journey. So being actually able to start at the beginning, or at least create common understanding across the teams, is often a really good place to start. But actually understanding and mapping who is going to be impacted by the change, because we're going that direction. we often don't create that plan, or we don't think through it in that way. Do we know everyone who's going to be facing a change? We often forget to slow down in order to speed up.
I always think of when companies think to bring in facilitators and leaders, and when they don't. And this seems like one of those things that companies think they're good at doing, even though they're so tremendously bad at doing. Melissa, how do you get in the door there?
It often just starts with a conversation like this to understand what's the current state, what are you hearing and seeing from people, and starting at the beginning before we head too much further down the track. I think one of the big things is being able to, because it is a challenge to the status quo, being able to take that step back and identify the influencers within the group that you're going to start to connect with, and you're going to start to build on, and explain actually why we're taking this, like why are we making this choice in the first place. Because actually understanding the why and explaining what's in it for me, for people, can have a really big impact on the success of where you land.
Because everybody's naturally concerned with how things are going to affect them and what's in it for them. So that only makes sense.
Exactly. We always take our own perspective, even though there might be a bigger business story. People are like, that's great, but what does it mean for me?
So to an extent, it's a negotiation, not like an edict that gets handed down from above. There's some give and take involved. You actually talk about micro negotiation in the book. Can you tell us more about that? What makes it micro?
Yeah, I think
you in a small room with little wooden chairs like they have at elementary schools, or
exactly. Small stakes is what makes it micro. So I think, and I think that's a theme of the whole book. So Melissa comes from a change management background. I like to say like capital C, capital M, like the big, when you need an expert and it's a big, long, multi-year project to do a thing. But I was seeing clients who had smaller changes and they needed some of that same skill set. And so smaller room, same skills. Same concept with the micro negotiations, right? So if I'm trying to get someone to shift their behavior, change their process, use a new tool, I can come in and say, throw everything out, start over. You've got to go to 4 hours of training. You've got to, all this big stuff. Or I can think about like, what are the little steps I need them to do step by step incrementally, and what motivates them. And that's where the negotiation part comes in, right? Anytime you sit down for a negotiation, you know what you want, you know what they want, and you're trying to mix and match those elements into something that we're both happy about. Most of the time, change leaders aren't thinking about what the other person wants. And it's really funny watching visionaries trying to articulate to single contributors, people that are really great at just getting stuff done, the core people in your organization that make things move. They are almost by definition not your visionary thinkers who can skip 18 steps to an outcome. They need to know the steps. They need to know sort of the pros and cons of each step, the outcomes. And so these micro negotiations can be just making them more comfortable in their own skin, the way that they operate. And that might mean for a visionary leader, like, okay, I'll slow down, I'll spell this out, I'll give you some resources and some time to think about this thing if you'll meet me at this small next step in the journey, right? It often involves giving away a little bit of power, which means like letting them weigh in on the change. Even if you know where you want to go and you're pretty sure what platform you're choosing, like bringing them in is a signal that they have some power in the dialogue. And that can be a way to sort of like bring a little bit of carrot to this conversation instead of just all stick.
I want to talk a little tiny bit about the actual book, the physical product of the book. It's made for people with ADD. There's lots of little broken up little sections. There's lots of bullets. There's a lot of graphics. I can't move my fingers. Yeah. Well, what's kind of funny here, hold this a second. I have a friend, Dave Gray. Dave Gray worked for a company called Explain. It was his company, and it was he's launched a thing called Visual Frameworks that'll be coming out as a Kickstarter.
They look like tarot cards.
They look like tarot cards, but in them are like, this is how to discuss and negotiate icebergs as a visual concept. And this one is, let's see, just grabbing a random one, a gain map. These graphics look like the graphics in your book in a weird way. I was just like a little jarred, like, I have the cards right beside me.
They're just clean and simple.
Yeah, just, visuals help the way you've broken the book up helps. Talk just a little bit about putting this book together, which, believe it or not, some people in the audience really do want to know about. Like, what was that? Like, what was the process of constructing these 160-ish pages, which looks so sparse, but it is full of so much information?
Thank you. First, I have to just point out, love Dave Gray and the Game Storming crew. And that drawing that you held up in our book is a Game Storming force field analysis. So we reference and point to them.
Well, there we go.
did a Game Storming expedition with some of Dave's crew because it's important to us to be able to visually tell stories. I think that's a skill of change leaders who are trying to take people on a journey. So we're modeling our own best practices. But in terms of putting together the book, it's really funny. This was a project that we had started like 5 years ago, thinking about trying to put a manifesto together about what we were seeing organizations do wrong. We've both been agency types who write roadmaps, and we were really frustrated seeing those roadmaps get handed to a group and then not having the skills to do anything with it. That is a tough legacy to leave, that what you've done is write a bunch of shelfware. So anyway, that's where we started, and the pandemic put a big pause on it. It's funny, we had a book that was a little more like, get in there and explain yourself and just tell them where you want to go, a little bit firmer, I would say. And then the pandemic came along, the workforce shift came along, and this book really capitalizes on what we have seen to be true, which is the human part of this staff and your employee is really what's going to get them to willingly come on a journey with you, sustain adoption, and make the workplace pleasant for everybody. So the process was really that those scribbledy scratch 5,000 words we had put together pre-pandemic got sent off to an amazing editor at the beginning of this year, actually. And she just queried us back and forth with some, do you mean this? And I'd like an example of that. And we really intentionally wrote a book that skipped out all of the describing the problem that you notice in the first chapter. It's like, if you feel like this book is for you, I'm not going to spend 3 chapters convincing you that this is a problem, because that's what I like to read on the plane home from a conference. It's like, just get me to the part where I'm doing things. And we just really wanted to put a handbook out there, knowing that we have plenty of opportunities to do book 2 with lots more deep dives.
What tips do you have for managers whose teams come to them with their change tokens pre-spent, for example, through acquisition? It's like everything has changed now, and we're going to have to make some more changes, but I know that my tokens are probably already read.
Chapter 5 is about psychological safety, and it really is the foundation to change. And I like to think of it as a way that you can recharge your tokens faster if you can invest in your team's psychological safety, which is just a researcher's term for a team's trust dynamic. So I can trust you, you can trust me, but when 4 of us are on a team, that team has its own trust dynamic, which is referred to as psychological safety. There's 4 domains, and it's things like open conversation and our attitude towards risk and failure, and our willingness to help each other, and inclusion, making sure every voice is pulled forward. There's a ton of research that says this is essentially the main definer of a successful team, like this concept, which you can assess. The researcher, Amy Edmondson, has a website called Fearless Organization, and you can do a quick self-assessment, right? So benchmark yourself there. Invest in psychological safety. It will recharge your change tokens. If you think about ways that you can make teams feel safe, feel comfortable, it gives them the buffer and the space to then navigate into the next change.
I tend to over-index on change. I will change and change and change again. I'm back in Massachusetts after having moved from here to Florida for 8 years, to Tennessee for 6 years, back here again. I've changed careers. I change everything
Quite
routinely.
often.
Yeah. And so it's hard for me to relate to someone who has a hard time switching from one calendar tool to another. Sometimes I realize that is an issue for me.
And a lot of, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to ask Melissa, you've done a lot with Samsung. You've tell us, I was looking through the list of some of the places you named in the book, and those are the environments, some of which I came from. I was a Ma Bell guy way back when that meant something. And I think that sort of is an analogy to what Kerry was talking about, which is that with 22-ish organizations all glued together, there's a bunch of people who are the vanquished in this storyline and are being told, you've got to learn how to be part of a big company. How have you experienced that in the past. What's your take?
I think being able to help teams create their own muscle, for this to be able to adapt and adjust is not easy. I recognize that. But it's kind of like a really great meal, right? If we are able to set expectations about, what it's going to be like when something happens, like when you arrive, or, what the the overall experience is going to be like. If we set teams up in that way and we create a very clear vision for where we're heading, then what happens is identifying the right people and inviting them along versus, we want change to happen with people, not to people, right? Because we don't like that. It feels icky. If someone says to you like, hey, that's happening tomorrow, like buck up. You're like, well, I have some thoughts about that, and I can tell you very clearly how I feel. So it's the baby steps that we're able to make and create a longer runway if possible. It doesn't have to, if you have the ability to do that, then that's where we've seen some real success, is actually talking to people and getting their thoughts up front about what it may mean for them and prepare them for it. Sorry,
That's
back
what I
to
was
you,
thinking
Kerry.
from what you were saying. No, I was going to say, so basically it's like slow your roll. So someone like me who's like, yes, let's change, blow everything up, let's start over.
Yeah.
So just take it a little slower.
Yeah.
And if you do need to accelerate, because sometimes timelines can't slow, like that's ideal. Ideal is slow down. The next most important thing I would say is something we call confidential inquiry in the book, which is basically just cone of silence conversations one-on-one with highly impacted folks. It's great if you can have this be an outsider, because that person doesn't bring baggage or politics or the sense that they're going to go run off and scurry and tell someone. But what we found to be really successful with integrations like the one you're describing is to sit down and really listen in a quiet way to what they're saying, and then to leverage those themes for leadership. So I can say, you think they're upset about this, but they're actually really frustrated about this other thing entirely. And that's within your power to fix. A lot of times people don't feel like they can say those things without spending social capital, without possibly having a backlash for whatever it is that they're feeling. But if you can absorb those feelings in a confidential way and then roll it up in a way that they can't be identified, there's often some really good nuggets in there for leadership to go, oh, that's all they needed? Absolutely. Let's just knock that out and keep this ball rolling.
There's at the beginning of the book, chapter one of the things I loved is that you start with what I think is one of the situations that happens so frequently in business, of identifying the actual change that needs to happen, the actual problem. Feels like something that you've had a lot of experience with, Melissa. Has that come through a lot?
Yeah, we're often so busy trying to solve symptoms that we don't solve the underlying problem. Because, we've all heard the analogy, the squeaky wheel, gets the grease. And so often people that come forward have one perspective, but may not represent an entire group of people, which is why, we talk about being able to map who's going to be impacted, because often it may be a small group, but their impact or their influence on how people think about what's happening, it can be pretty significant. So being able to get to the heart of the problem, and by asking questions with those people, can actually fast forward you through some of the bumpy middle bits, because you actually have the insight around what you're trying to solve for in the first place, versus just jumping to a solution. Because, all of us are better than just one of us, because there's just different perspectives.
Right. Although that made me think of another question that I'm not going to ask you this interview, only because of time reasons, but I also forgot to ask her about the backpack stuff. So, hey.
Oh, and here's our person of the day. Kaboom!
My person of the day is going to be Jane, because I haven't seen Jane in a while, and I was just so happy.
Hi,
to.
Jane.
So
Just having delayed change fatigue from the start of the pandemic. That's a thing too. It's
That's a
definitely
thing.
backing up on all of us.
finally, like, I've gone as long as I can go, blah, and then you finally blow it. So, hey, look at that. My dad says, I implemented a password change at a company for the word processing system with little to no input from the affected employees. On the date of implementation, we had one employee quit on the spot. Wow. Well, Dad.
No, you can say your dad has made people quit.
My dad's made people
You've probably
quit.
made people quit.
I help people quit. Okay, so we forgot to ask you one particular thing, which is very end of the show. We ask every single guest who's been on. This includes Sir Mix-a-Lot, Sister Ann Flanagan, Mistress Harley, all the same question, which is what goes in your backpack? This could be something physical. It could be something metaphorical. It could be something like an avocado or hope for the future. Kerry, what's a great physical thing someone could add to a backpack?
Extra set of teeth.
Oh, an extra set of
DJ
teeth.
Cumberbund from YouTube suggested that.
Makes perfect sense to me.
You never know.
Yeah. And what's something metaphorical?
Kindness. Ariel Helvetica, burlesque performer, put kindness in the backpack.
Yeah. A few last comments, but we're going to ask you the question, what goes in your backpack? So let's start with Melissa Breker. What would you add to the backpack?
I actually was going to say kindness, but there you go.
Pity.
Curses. I think simplicity. Like when you travel, think about maybe not only what you can add, but what you can take out. I'm notorious in trying to think of all scenarios and trying to get all of the things in the backpack. So metaphorically, maybe it's about thinking about simplicity. If that it's not adding, but it's taking out, but it's kind of adding because then your journey is lighter.
Only the second guest ever to take something out of the backpack. The Oral Knots YouTube creators had taken ego out of the backpack.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So
All right, Jenny Magic, what's going in the backpack for you?
Turn-by-turn directions. I cannot find my way out of a paper bag, and I think metaphorically and literally, that's what our book's about, is stop trying to imagine the destination and imagine yourself there, but figure out what your turn-by-turn directions are going to be.
Wow. Well, if recalculating was a famous last word, that's the one. Let's see. The token might have helped going forward. It could. And Jake says backpack, curiosity, listen, don't react, and kindness. Very nice, Jake. I like
Kindness.
those.
Kindness always helps.
Kindness seems to win, I guess. I don't know.
Always helps.
Yeah.
No one's ever been like, gosh, I wish that person was meaner to me.
Yeah.
I mean, like rarely, but definitely not at work.
Not at work.
no.
Wow, we are getting all the comments at the end of the show. Hey, look, it's Dan Gorgone.
Oh, hey.
Happy Donut Day.
I'll bring you some donuts.
Oh, donuts. Great book on ideas and processes. So glad to see this happening in the corporate world. That's it. Well, I always give the last word.
She was wise.
She was wise.